Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast. With me this week are Jeff Ranke and Anna's back. Anna Wells. How you doing, Anna?
Hi.
We each have more than 15 years of experience covering the manufacturing industry. Every week we take the 5 most popular stories on our websites and discuss the implications they have on the industry going forward. Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. Also, we are live every Thursday, so subscribe to us on YouTube at IN Magazine to make sure you get a notification whenever we go live. And I have to say thank you to the people that came through for us. We hit our goal of 8,000 subscribers on YouTube.
Awesome. Nice.
We did it in a week, which means we just have a new goal now. Now we got to hit 9,000. Thank you, everyone. I think actually Andy just came through and emailed his family because we got a lot of Zal 67s, you know.
Wow.
Yeah, coming in.
Zal 67.
They have their own domain even.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you, family Zal. All right. Well, before we get started, I also wanted to remind everybody we have 2 more episodes until we get to our 100th episode. We're going to do 1 more episode in 2022, and then we're going to start off the new year with episode 100. How does that sound to you guys?
Incredible.
I like how you set it up like the 100th episode is going to be somehow different. It's going to be the same.
We'll have giveaways.
Spoiler alert.
Yes.
That's what Anna thinks.
We'll have
until she gets surprised.
Unique giveaways like shirts.
Hats.
And hats. No, we'll figure something out. Send ideas. We'll give away cowboy candy.
There you go.
Before we get started with our first story, we have a word from our sponsor this week, Enchanted Rock. Jeff, what do you have to say about Enchanted Rock?
Yeah, you know, really interesting company doing some pretty cool stuff. We've talked a lot on this podcast about the impact of natural disasters, some of the other things that are impacting grid reliability, like the influx of electric vehicles and the growth around that market, even just the increased demands from both consumers and the industrial sector. So what Enchanted Rock has put together is a bunch of research and information related to microgrids, which can be a potential solution to some of these challenges when it comes to outages and things like that. We put together a video about some of the offerings that they have and a lot of just information that kind of simplifies this. Microgrids can seem very complex in nature. Enchanted Rock does a nice job kind of breaking it down. So encourage you to check out the video.
All right. We have 1 more word from our sponsor before we jump into our first story.
There are a number of factors impacting the performance of our national electric grid, ranging from uncontrollable and extreme natural occurrences like floods, hurricanes, and wildfires, to shifting user dynamics like renewable energy and electric vehicles. And as the grid ages, the risks associated with human error and equipment failures are also increasing. Parallel to improving grid resilience is a focus on a cleaner power, with goals to limit greenhouse gas emissions and improve air quality. For more information, go to enchantedrock.com or download some of the company's additional information assets listed on this page.
And we're back. See, we switched it up on you a little bit there. We did the read before the video, and that's all just because of a communication error. No one's at fault. Our first story this week: Ford debuts GT MK4 Supercar. Ford says its new supercar is the ultimate and most extreme track-only Ford GT ever built. The new Ford GT MK4 by Ford Performance and Multimatic has a unique twin-turbo EcoBoost engine, racing transmission, aero-focused exterior design and chassis with a longer wheelbase for improved on-track handling. The third-generation MK4 also has a new carbon fiber body that is functional yet visually striking. Still, the car is a nod to the year that the original MK4 won the 24-Hour of Le Mans. Multimatic's facility in Markham, Ontario will hand-build 67 supercars with a starting MSRP of $1.7 million. Deliveries will begin in late spring 2023. Larry Holt, Executive VP of Multimatic's Special Vehicle Operations Group, says he wanted to create, quote, the most extreme final version of the Ford GT. Now, the word final stuck out to me, Anna. He also used swan song. Is this $1.7 million supercar a true swan song for the Ford GT?
Yes, it's the epitome of a swan song. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's definitely a pretty special car, especially for Ford aficionados. I mean, it's pretty exciting that they redesigned this from scratch to incorporate all the modern bells and whistles. I can see that there will be some interest in it.
About 67 interests in it?
I don't even know if we can get to 67 on this. 1.7 million, and I like how they were clear that is the starting,
yeah,
manufacturer's suggested retail price.
When you're at that point, I feel like bells and whistles aren't really that big of a deal.
No, I agree. I mean, you're definitely appealing to a certain person here, but that number, that 1.7 million, that puts this within the top 10 Ford sale prices ever sold in history, and that includes things like a 1967 Shelby Mustang GT 500 Eleanor that was sold at auction for $1 million. That's a collector car. That's
like a one of one.
One of one, yeah. Another, there's a Shelby GR1 concept that fetched $3 million in 2015. This would go right kind of in the middle of those two. But again, those are really collector's items. Track only? Can Ford really find 67 buyers for this? I know you guys saw this. We recently covered that story about how the crypto market collapse was impacting luxury car purchases and prices, suggesting that the billions that were lost in the crypto game in the last couple of months were really impacting a certain demographic of buyers who had spent heavily on luxury vehicles in the last few years. Now they're putting those vehicles on these resale websites up for auction, and because there's so many, their prices, they're not fetching the same prices that they were a year or two ago. So I don't know if that's a larger indicator of people's appetite right now for buying these types of expensive vehicles, but it does suggest, I think, that maybe there was some inflated level of demand over the last few years that I hope Ford wasn't incorporating into its calculation as to whether or not to do this. It's a cool car. I hope Ford can sell it. I don't know. We'll see.
The crypto crash.
The crypto crash.
Who saw it coming? Jeff, Ford is going to hand pick customers. Do you think maybe they arrived at that 67 number with 67 very specific people in mind?
There's more than 67 people who are lining up to buy this vehicle.
Yeah.
I guarantee it. These vehicles are sold already.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that goes back to the legacy of what the Ford GT really means. You've probably seen documentaries. I think Matt Damon did a movie, Ford versus Ferrari.
Oh, yeah.
That's where this GT goes back to. And really, when Ford was able to compete with Ferrari and some of those other bigger European sports car manufacturers, it proved a lot of things. And it really brought into perspective that whole what wins on Sunday sells on Monday type of dynamic. Not that Ford was looking to go compete with Ferrari in terms of a brand name or performance for the everyday vehicle or that type of application, but it showed that American vehicle manufacturing engineering was as good as anybody in the world. And in my opinion, what it really led to is, yes, we already had a Corvette, we already had a Camaro, we already had a Mustang at that time, but showing that a Ford, a GT, could go head-to-head at Le Mans and not only win the first 3 spots in 66, but then follow it up in 67 and win it again. That really ushered in a new confidence in U.S. automotive engineering that will always have enthusiasts flocking towards this vehicle and this make, the GT. It's iconic, it's legacy, and it ties in more than just to a supercar that's overpriced at $1.7 million. It's
so
really
overpriced.
about the legacy and the history of what automotive performance for a U.S. auto manufacturer became and is still today. The other thing is, I'm always excited when I see these. At first, it's like, hey, Ford, don't you got other things to do right now? But from an R&D perspective, when you're looking at a company that spends about $7.5 billion on R&D every year, these types of projects are important because, again, it's what this leads to. When we look at the engine performance, when we look at the handling and things like that, when you look at NASCAR and all the safety enhancements that have trickled down into the vehicles that we drive every day and that your kids will be driving, that my kids are driving right now, those are important things too. So I get excited when I see these vehicles coming out because I can see what it's going to lead to in terms of engine performance, overall vehicle performance, fuel economy. A lot of the composites and body styles and aerodynamics that are going into these vehicles will lead to what's going to make electric vehicles go further on that charge and offer potentially more confidence to vehicle buyers down the road. So it's all the things that were in the past that brought us now and what it presents going forward. And that's why I'm excited when I do see these concepts, even though that price tag's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I guarantee you these are already sold.
we were just priced out of this one. I'm equally excited about the advanced materials that go into supercars, as well as the advanced manufacturing techniques that go into them as well. Jeff, I'll pose the same question to you as I did Anna. Maybe if I set the bar at 5 years, would you take the over or under as to when we see another Ford GT?
It's definitely a pause on the GT because I think what their plan is actually to take the Mustang. I mean, they put all that energy into the electric Mustang. I think you're going to see them push that. I think they are actually set up in 2024 to run the Mustang at Le Mans. So I think it's going to sort of take that route. But yeah, the GT is going to circle back. It's just too iconic of a
just
label.
like, you know what? This incredibly popular brand for us. Time to put it to bed. We got enough winners here, guys.
Right.
Fun side note, guys. When I was a kid, we had a Pontiac Le Mans in the 1980s. Do you remember that car?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no. Decent car?
No. Not cool at all.
The 70s versions were like the epitome of muscle.
Oh,
so
okay.
when they started scaling them back, they got confused in sort of this intermediate type of vehicle that just, it was trying to look really tough, but it just wasn't.
It didn't look...
Yeah, it did
That's not a bad car.
I don't agree.
I don't know. I don't know. It would make for a good heist movie. All right, our next most popular story. United places huge order with Boeing to replace aging planes. On Tuesday, United Airlines ordered 100 new Boeing 787s. The massive twin-aisle jetliners will replace planes nearing retirement and help United expand into international routes. United also added about 100 Boeing 737 MAXs. United will choose between three sizes of the 787, which carries a list price ranging from $248 million per plane to $338 million per plane. Airlines typically buy in bulk to get a discount. Still, it is a win for the plane maker, who has had issues with a pair of MAX crashes and the 787s in terms of production issues. United is scheduled to begin receiving the 787s in 2024 and has an option on 100 more. The deal is being heralded as the biggest ever in both 787 history, but all wide-body planes as well. Anna, your thoughts on United placing such a large order with Boeing?
I mean, on the one hand, you're happy for Boeing's big order. On the other, I think it's got to be a little nerve-wracking for Boeing's leadership as they consider the possibility of any of this falling through. The timing of it feels a little bit... I don't know, tentative to me, just because like there's just so many variables happening with the travel industry, which hasn't really bounced back since pre-pandemic. They don't really expect that to occur until 2025. I feel like it's maybe a big if to consider that we will get there by 2025. If we're looking at a recession in 2023, even if it's mild, that could impact travel in a big way. That you know that old thing that they say, like, sell your airline stocks if there's a recession. That's because they get hit so hard, not just from people's wallets being impacted and business travel being impacted, but also as a commodity, oil is typically impacted right away, which would mean they would have a lot higher costs for this staple item to operate. So it will be interesting to see, obviously buying more efficient planes that you can take on more routes. Like, this is a good long-term play for an airline like United, but I don't know if... against the backdrop of a sluggish economy, potentially maybe they're just hedging against the hope that this will be mild and short-lived, and then we're just going to burn right through it, and then they can move on. But even this article that was very unbiased kind of described this as a big swing for United based on the recent issues that they've had, and so I don't think that's something that we can really undercount in terms of a factor that could influence this. You see airlines pull plane orders like this big. You saw a lot of that happen in the recession. So, it's not unheard of for them to announce this and then in a year or two say, no, we're not doing it. I don't know. I don't know what kind of, deposits they have to put down.
Yeah.
Because it seems like...
You haven't bought a plane lately?
I know. You know what? I haven't. I spent a lot of money on this Ford GT that was almost $2 million. Yeah. So, plane later. I guess.
Your toy funds are a little bit low right now.
Yeah.
Compared to the 787, you're getting that thing for a steal when you're under 2. Jeff, do you have the same skepticism when it comes to this deal?
I do not, David.
Wow,
I'm going to be positive on
we
this
have swapped
one.
sides today.
We're right around here. So, two different perspectives here. First, looking at United, I think obviously we don't know what 2023 is going to bring.
Right.
There's a lot of pessimistic outlooks, but I think what United is saying is, okay, look. 2020 was obviously brutal. I mean, travel numbers are up 300% since then, understandably.
Yeah.
Even from last year, they're up about 15 to 20%, which is good. But like Anna alluded to, still not back to pre-pandemic levels, and we're not sure when they're going to get there. However, it's almost running in a parallel to what auto dealers are seeing because of all the cutbacks in terms of they can't find employees, either it's pilots or flight attendants or ground crew. Fuel prices have obviously gone up. So the prices for airline tickets, and I think if anybody's flown recently, you can feel this or appreciate it, they're up on average over 40%.
Yeah.
So you've got fewer flights, fewer employees, planes are packed, and you're charging more. I think the revenue structure is pretty good right now for a United or some of the larger airlines. So I think they're kind of leveraging that. We've got cash now. All right, we've got some reserves here after a couple of bad years. Boeing, which has about 120 of these planes, just sitting around right now because they were grounded forever. They couldn't finish them off. They're sitting there ready to go. Let's take advantage of this situation in terms of we've got cash flow. We can probably get some good financing right now as well. Maybe we can get a sweetheart deal because Boeing also needs some cash flow and getting these things out the door instead of just sitting on a tarmac someplace. I think they're taking advantage of both of those situations, United is, in sort of saying, hey, let's roll the dice a little bit. As you guys have alluded to, people have backed off on these deals in the past if things go sideways. But I think it's maybe a time for United to go big and take a little bit of a risk. I mean, Boeing is also probably very receptive to cutting some deals on these planes because they have been sitting around. Pick your economic statistic in terms of their share value, the stock price being cut by as much as a third just this year.
Yeah.
We've seen them lose market share to Airbus to the point where the planes that are one size smaller than this, like the single aisle planes, they're no longer the market leader there. They've lost overall. Their market share has dipped below 50% in terms of commercial airliners. So, again, I think we've got two companies saying, hey, this could work out for both of us right now. Let's go for it.
Part of the reason I'm optimistic is because there's a very harsh reality that a lot of planes need to be shifted out of service very soon because they are 30 years old, approaching 30 years old, or already more than 30 years old. United sees a lot of positives, particularly with the 787's fuel efficiency, which is a 25% improvement compared to the airplanes that will be retired. So kind of a faster ROI, if you will. The deal will help the airline expand international flights. According to the AP, when you're talking about a big deal, this could be worth up to $19 billion, depending on the versions of the aircraft that United selects and what kind of deal they're looking at. Jeff, a little bit about that backlog you're talking about. I'm sitting around. In November, Boeing reported a backlog of more than 4,400 aircraft. The vast majority, more than 3,500 of them, are for the 737. So the orders are out there. The company has some 420 Dreamliners on order. As of October 31st, Boeing delivered 363 aircraft in 2022. 300 of those were 737s, 15 were 787s. So the orders are there. Hopefully production can continue pace. Our next most popular story this week: lifting magnet problems lead to severe accident at fab company. On not July, it's the other one. On June 7th, 2022, an employee at Kewanee Fabrications in Kewanee, Wisconsin, was using an Erie's XPL 15.9 close proximity operated lifting magnet when a 1,254-pound counterweight fell from the below the hook magnet and crushed an employee's leg. The worker was hospitalized. Following an OSHA investigation, the company now faces more than $250,000 in penalties for 1 willful and 11 serious safety violations. According to OSHA, the Erie's magnet had metal buildup and pitting on the contact surface that wasn't removed prior to use. OSHA found several issues at Kewanee, most that stemmed from challenges with lifting magnets. For example, about 2 weeks after the accident, employees were using a pair of battery-powered magnets to move metal parts, despite the fact that they had both failed breakaway force tests. According to OSHA, the company is taking the accident seriously, with safety reps documenting problems and finding solutions to make sure they remain compliant going forward. Kewanee Fabrications makes aerial ladders and mounting plates used on fire trucks. It's the ladders. OSHA says one way to fix the problem is to ensure that the magnets are inspected before use and in accordance with the manufacturer's specifications. Jeff, I saw a lot of positive things with this. One, that the company is taking it seriously, working with OSHA, trying to make sure everything is improved going forward. What were your thoughts when you saw this article come out of Kewanee Fabrications?
First thing that caught my mind is this is actually where we vacationed this summer. We were right in Kewanee, up near Lake Michigan in Door County. So that was the first thing that came to mind. Outside of that, I think what it reinforced to me, and I actually thought back a little bit to my time in the Army, is when you're using a piece of equipment, even as dynamic as this lifting magnet is, it can sort of become just common and just another thing that you're doing, and don't always appreciate in that moment or in those moments every day how things can go sideways very quickly if you're not paying attention to the proper use and application. I think it is important to call here too, it wasn't something that was deficient with the lifting magnet being used, it was the fact that it was not being maintained properly, and there was some common sense that was missing. I think there's enough blame to go around in terms of bad practices in place, but also the employees using it, just not paying attention to detail. Blocking and tackling, right, David?
Yeah, blocking and tackling. Line 3 on the review. No.
So those were some of the initial things that came to mind. Also, in digging into this company, I think it's because the line that caught my attention as well is when they said how safety and people at the plant were taking this very seriously and following up. Looking at the company, they are a subsidiary of Oshkosh, which is a huge defense contract. So if it has wheels and some sort of tactical dynamic, chances are Oshkosh makes it for the military. A lot of lifting, like cranes and other types of equipment. If it can haul troops, equipment, or weapons, it may be made by Oshkosh. So I'm sure they were also very quick to try to take corrective action here, with the chance that people start looking into and not challenging or putting any obstacles in the way of all those huge defense contracts that the parent company is receiving.
One thing about this story that I was encouraged by is that we do a lot of these safety stories because we hope that people see what happened previously so they don't make the same mistake going forward. I had 2 people reach out to me after we did this video about how they have, one company in particular had more than 20 of these magnets in service every day. They knew about the cleaning and the surface area, watching that, but they had no idea about the breakaway testing. And it was something that they reached out and said, and I'm going to look into that tomorrow.
Wow, interesting.
It was a really impressive reminder of how, and kind of to your point, Jeff, these are used every day. We've been in facilities where they're using these massive magnets. I remember the first time I saw one. It is, a magnet smaller than my laptop, and it is lifting thousands of pounds of metal. And you're just like, and that's it? That's it. And everyone's cool because, they've been using that tool for 20 years. Anna, what were your thoughts on what happened with this OSHA investigation and the changes that the company is going to make going forward?
Yeah, I mean, it was good to see, as you said, that the company is cooperating with the regulators on how to move forward. Obviously, it's like we're so grateful to see that, because so often you just see the opposite.
Oh yeah, it's just pushback.
Pushback, people trying to get it, like, just move on without doing the due diligence, repeated offenses in these areas, things like that. Yeah, lifting magnets are no joke, as you said. I mean, there's all kinds of safety protocols around them. You know, you can get easily crushed, pinched, trapped fingers, extremities. Even charge interruptions can occur, so they just fall, and you know, I mean, that it's really scary. That magnet has enough power; it can screw up a pacemaker, it can wipe your entire cell phone. But Erie's is a big company, and they've been around forever. They're an expert in the lifting magnets. That's what they do. So it's pretty obvious that they have protocols, best practices, manuals, all this stuff in place. They know what they're doing there. It's not like they just bought this from some uncredible distributor from China or something. Like, Erie's is like, they are the magnet people, right? So it is unfortunate to see this bad maintenance taking place on these. It's sad to see that there's these breakaway tests that people don't know about, aren't adhering to. Sounds like they, you know, in many cases want to. They just So
Well, it's so common that
yeah.
Plant managers and other personnel, safety personnel, think they are doing everything by the book, and yet something might fall through the cracks.
Yeah, exactly. And I think in the case of Kewaunee, I mean, concerning for sure that these people in the plant were continuing to use compromised equipment after this took place.
Yeah.
You would think that that would be enough, the incident, to like, let's shut everything down. We got to figure this out. What happened here? Is it, you know, but you know, you wonder, like, are the people in charge negligent? Are they lazy? How could they not take that step at that time? So that's disappointing to see how long it took. Obviously, they just needed some assistance from OSHA maybe to figure that out.
Yeah, that was a level of hubris that kind of shocked me as well. Only because you just had an accident very recently due to problems with the magnets. How about you not make the same mistake twice within a 6-month period?
Well, I wonder at some point, and maybe it's already taking place, but when is the human resources arm of some of these enterprises going to get more heavily involved in safety? Because when you're looking to fill positions at a facility, as everybody is right now, there's a huge labor shortages going on. These types of incidents that get these types of headlines and this much coverage don't help your recruitment efforts.
This is the first thing that's going to come up on Google for this company for the next how many years. And yeah, anytime anyone's job prospecting, it's not going to help.
Robert Bonack, OSHA's area director in Appleton, Wisconsin, wanted to remind manufacturers that they must constantly review safety procedures and equipment to make sure all points of operations are guarded, equipment is in safe working condition, and workers are trained to recognize hazards. Our next most popular story: Stellantis idles Illinois plant indefinitely. On Friday, Stellantis announced plans to halt operations in Belvidere, Illinois, indefinitely. The plan makes Jeep Cherokee SUVs. The company said it was forced to make the move due to cost increases resulting from the shift to electric vehicles. According to Reuters, some 1,350 employees are going to be laid off. Stellantis says it's possible the plant will never open again as the company weighs other options. The United Auto Workers Union was, quote, deeply angered by the decision. Stellantis said the industry's, quote, most impactful challenge is the increasing cost related to the electrification of the automotive market. Anna, did you buy Stellantis throwing EVs under the bus for something that might have, a decision that might have been made quite a while ago?
What do you think, David?
I think I'm teeing it up for you, Anna.
Yeah. I have some big feelings about this one.
All right.
You know, unfortunately, this is one of those things that I think we saw coming. This plant has experienced multiple rounds of temporary shutdowns in the past. So when I saw it, I was disappointed, but I was not shocked. I think what it really comes down to is that Stellantis is behind when it comes to EV development. And that's not to say that it's not costly, that it's not requiring major upheaval. We know that it is. But if you look at some of their peers and what they're doing, like Ford's F-150 Lightning EV was just named the Motor Trend Truck of the Year. GM CEO just said that EVs will be profitable for the company by 2025. Meanwhile, Stellantis ranks dead last in fleet-wide fuel economy. They continue to complain publicly about EVs while they're quite effectively producing them and selling them in Europe. And then here in the US, they have like a handful of plug-ins and no full electrics. They have plans to get there by 2025, which leaves them to put like their first model out in 2025, which leaves them way behind everybody else. So maybe that means aggressive cost-cutting measures here, but my question is, why? Like, it's sort of a head scratcher to me. Again, we know EVs are a big swing for auto in general, but this hasn't exactly been a secret. And even when Donald Trump in his presidency was trying to unravel some of those federal EPA guidelines on fuel efficiency, California wasn't. So a lot of automakers were taking that as, we need to move forward regardless on this, because even if something changes here, it will very likely change back in a new administration. And if California is going to keep their CAFE standards intact and make us, reach these new guidelines on miles per gallon, they're not going to make 2 models of every vehicle. They have to follow those. So I don't think any of the leaders at those companies were dumb enough to think that they were going to get away with not doing this transition. I just don't understand why Stellantis is so far behind here. I mean, they're like the number 2 leader in EVs in Europe. So what is so hard about this? Like, why wait so long here? I just don't understand.
It doesn't make sense to me. Jeff, do you have any insight as to why Stellantis fell behind?
Well, I think there's a couple things. I don't know why they blamed EVs for this particular factory closing. I think it was just more market dynamics. And let's be real. I mean, in this Belvedere facility, and we see it all the time. We've talked about it before, going down to O'Hare or wherever in northern Illinois. It's I think we're kind of confused what to do with it. I mean, it started with the Neon back in the day, transitioned to the Dart. Now they've been doing Jeeps over the last handful of years. We're looking at a facility that we've also covered on this podcast for a number of shutdowns during the pandemic, where they paused production and they weren't sure what to do. Since 2000, I want to say 16, it's slowly diminished in number of employees from over 5,000 to the 1,300, unfortunately, that are going to be laid off here. So I just think there was a lot of writing on the wall in terms of where this facility was headed, and I think it's more market factors. When you look internally with Stellantis, and specifically at the Jeep vehicles, the Grand Cherokee has seen their sales fall since over the last 5 years. It's been going down. I think that's because it's competing not with Jeeps, but with SUVs. That's what it looks like.
Yeah.
The SUV market is flooded. You have numerous options out there. Also internally, when you're looking at a Jeep, Wranglers and Compass models are holding very strong, performing very well in that market. So you're competing internally right there as a Jeep product. Then you can also look at the fact that Stellantis actually stuck about $4.5 billion into a facility up in Detroit that they opened up last summer that is going to be focusing on the Jeep Grand Cherokee and the electric version of the Jeep Grand Cherokee. So when you've got all of that going on, yeah, this facility, unfortunately, was just sort of a victim of the times and a lot of those different dynamics that are in place. Why Stellantis would not just come out and say this facility is no longer useful to
viable.
us? It's just not.
People would get that if they had said that.
Especially when you see the track record and you point out to all the other things that are going on. To throw EVs under the bus is really a head scratcher. I don't even know why you would offer that up as a potential headline. That doesn't make sense to me.
I feel like we talk about it a lot on this podcast, where the issues with communication and just saying exactly what is happening and being real with people would save you a lot of time in the long run.
Yeah.
Stellantis did say that it hopes to relocate all indefinitely laid off employees to plants in places like Detroit, Ohio, and Virginia, but we understand what it means to uproot your family and move to a different state. I think we should talk a little bit about the impact it's going to have on that community. Belvedere, the population in that is a small community. It's only 25,000 people. I understand that people probably commute from quite a ways away, but that is going to have a long-standing impact if they're not direct employees in Belvedere. all the surrounding businesses that help cater to those employees. I think that's something that needs to be understood and recognized as well. It's going to have a tremendous, we've seen all of these factory towns and how they go through a dark period, and some are lucky enough to come out of it on the other end. Tim Ferguson was the shop chairman for the United Auto Workers Local 1268, which represents Belvedere's hourly workers. He told the American Prospect that it is widely known that Cherokee production, gas, hybrid, and all-electric models is moving to Toluca, Mexico. Ferguson said that he received this information from the plant manager and company documents. Again, if this is something that might be common knowledge to internal employees, I don't understand why you blame it on EVs as like a misdirect.
Yeah, I didn't get that either. The one thing, too, I would say is this is a prime location. If you are a manufacturer, from a logistics perspective, great highways, very close to O'Hare, huge infrastructure already in place. Maybe the city of Belvidere is going to be working with Stellantis in some way to find a new tenant for this area, because this would be a prime manufacturing real estate.
And I think local officials are working on incentives to try and keep the business, but we'll see if that's even possible. Yeah. But you're right, it's around a lot of large communities with, a strong labor force. Our most popular story this week: Ford Mustang loses spot as most American-made car. It didn't just lose the top spot, but it fell dramatically. The Ford Mustang is American muscle, but the vehicle has been stripped of its title for most American-made car. American University's Kogod School of School of Business recently released its annual Made in America Auto Index. Last year, the manual transmission Ford Mustang topped the list. This year, that model fell to number 22. A big part of the problem is that Ford began sourcing the vehicle's transmission from Mexico. The Ford Motor Company still controls the top two spots on the list. The Lincoln Corsair, along with its plug-in hybrid version, came in tied for first with 72% U.S. and Canadian parts and a U.S.-made engine. Rounding out the top three is the long-range Tesla Model 3 with 65% of its content coming from U.S. and Canada, and the Chevy Corvette Stingray with 62%. Tesla has 5 models in the top 10. The list uses 7 criteria to determine the most American-made vehicles: profit margin, labor, R&D, inventory, capital and other expenses, engine, transmission, and body, chassis, and electrical components. It doesn't consider reputation or public perception. That's how the Honda Passport can make the top 10, while the Mustang is down at 22. Anna, your thoughts on this list, and does it matter? Is the Ford Mustang sort of impervious to losing this type of title without really losing much of its shine?
I think so. I think there's a lot of misinformation, and you just alluded to public perception around Made in America, especially as it comes to automotive. According to Cars.com, 40% of post-pandemic new vehicle shoppers say that buying a car that's made in America is important to them, which is up from 22% a year ago. So that's 18-point increase over a year. That seems quite high, but anyway. Cars.com also has its own list that it produces, and it published a version of this list in July of most Made in America vehicles. Of the top 6, Tesla took 4 slots, including number 1 and 2, and the Lincoln Corsair took 3rd.
Okay.
My point here is that auto production is very complex. There are a lot of variables that go into how these vehicles are evaluated for their Americanness, obviously. And if this were a straightforward assessment, if this were an easy process to figure out, there would not be variations between these two lists, right? So when people increasingly say that they want to buy an American-made car, what does that mean? Probably just that they want to support the American economy with their purchase. I think that makes sense. Like, as much as possible, we try to do that. So with that in mind, consider that every automaker, whether foreign or domestic, that actually assembles vehicles in the U.S., and there's a lot of them, they're dumping a lot of money into these workforces and these communities. I think a similar question that's been posed in the past is it better to buy a car from an American company that supply chain is heavily embedded overseas, or a foreign company that's mostly manufactured in the U.S. with domestic parts? And the answer, even if you look at experts, they hesitate to give you an answer to that question because it's very complex, and you have to consider the local impacts, and that even foreign companies have tax obligations here in the U.S. when they produce cars here. The benefits to their shareholders have largely been democratized over the years, so anyone in any country can buy Porsche stock if they want, even though it's a German company. It's very multifaceted, and I think in the end, people who want to support American manufacturing with their companies, they don't necessarily need to choose one on one of these lists in order to feel good about their purchase. That's my opinion. I think you can feel good about, for example, buying a VW that's produced in Chattanooga. Just knowing what a big boost that provides to that community and those workers with those really high-paying jobs. And, if that weren't important, then you would not see this massive scrambling by these local and state entities trying to woo these automakers to be there. They know they're good jobs. They know they have a tremendous ripple effect on the community. So whether or not it's American flag flying company, it still has a lot of value. So in my opinion, it's sort of this nebulous concept to look at made in America, and I think there's a lot of other factors that you can consider as well.
And it's probably different to every individual buyer.
Right.
Anna talks about Americanness, Jeff, which is why I was confused when some of these stats talked about sourcing from both U.S. and Canada.
Yeah, that was an unusual dynamic. There's a couple other things with the criteria that they use, which I think deserves maybe a little bit of scrutiny. In terms of, to me, the labor component of it would be the most significant to me when you're looking at that, and that counts for either a 6 or a 0, depending on where the vehicle is actually assembled. So if it's here, it's 6. If it's not, if it's here, it's 6. If it's not, it's a 0. But then you look at body, chassis, and electrical components. That's half the score right there, and where those things come from.
Man.
So when you look at electrical components, those have been coming from other places forever. Okay? So I think these types of ratings have decreased in significance over time. I think most automotive buyers understand the dynamics of what's going on. I think by me buying a Nissan, that doesn't mean I'm opposed to U.S. manufacturing or don't want to support that. The dealer I bought it from is right here in Wisconsin. So, there's still definitely a local dynamic. I think the other thing that consumers, regardless of the market category, are more understanding of is we live in an increasingly global economy. Things are sourced from all over. And do we want to beat, in this case, Ford, do we want to beat them up because they had some smart supply chain dynamics in place that help keep the cost of that vehicle down?
Exactly.
I want to support U.S. manufacturing more or as much as anybody else. But you know what? I'm really appreciative of the fact that by smart sourcing, I can buy that Mustang for $50,000 instead of $95,000. So I think, again, these are interesting to look at, and definitely there's goals in place that when we look at sourcing internally here in the U.S. and putting up an infrastructure that supports broader manufacturing initiatives, that's all positive. But at the same time, the real world dynamics are that there's going to be more stuff coming from more places. It's just what it is.
It's just odd that Ford decides to nearshore with the Mustang, and this school determines Americanness to be Canadian and United States.
Yeah, but Mexico.
But not Mexico?
I know. I found that to be very odd.
Yeah. It's less American. It's like, well, it's all kind of right there. It's how many people do you guys think this sways? And I think we're kind of a mix in terms of the average car buyer. Do you think this sways people in terms of when they go to look for a car, they're looking for the most American-made car? Jeff, I'll start with you.
No.
Yeah.
I really don't. I don't think they look at it that closely. Maybe as it becomes more competitive to find a vehicle. Right now, we're still a little bit of a shortage out there, and that's supposed to bleed into maybe 2024 or longer. Maybe you start looking at those things, but right now, I don't really see that as a significant dynamic.
Anna?
I mean, again, if this were a more straightforward assessment that you could apply across the board, then maybe people would look at it more closely. But to have like these varying lists and variables and the way people tabulate it is different and stuff. To me, that means like it's very hard to look at that and take it 100% seriously. I would be curious if anyone listening finds this to be I don't know, influential in terms of their purchasing. If it does, please let us know. I would like to know.
Given how muddy these stats are, I could just see every dealership having the most American cars. What do we need to move? Yeah, no, that Cherokee, that's the most American-made car. Get it on the top. Get it on the top. The Ford Maverick won Cars.com's Best of the Year in 2022 and Best Pickup Truck of 2022. It's manufactured in Mexico. The Mustang Mach-E, made in Mexico. GM's Buick brand manufactures the Enclave in Michigan, but the rest of its lineup imported from China and South Korea. Stellantis makes the Challenger and Charger muscle cars in Canada. So it's a mix, and to that point, I don't know how much it sways people personally.
So, right, like you think people have this impression that if they bought a Dodge Challenger, that's an American car.
Oh yeah,
right.
I mean, a lot of that's marketing.
No, that's my point.
Yeah.
That I don't know that even if people, that's something they say they care about, is anyone really looking in depth at these long supply chains and trying to determine between these 3 lists and all these calculations, I figured it out.
Yeah, I think having Mike Rowe or Dennis Leary tell them it's built Ford tough is enough for them to think it's
That's
American.
enough, I guess.
Yeah. All right. Before we get started with our In Case You Missed It segment, we have a word from our sponsor that is going to start with this video.
There are a number of factors impacting the performance of our national electric grid, ranging from uncontrollable and extreme natural occurrences like floods, hurricanes, and wildfires, to shifting user dynamics like renewable energy and electric vehicles. And as the grid ages, the risks associated with human error and equipment failures are also increasing. Parallel to improving grid resilience is a focus on a cleaner power, with goals to limit greenhouse gas emissions and improve air quality. For more information, go to enchantedrock.com or download some of the company's additional information assets listed on this page.
And we're back for a little bit more about Enchanted Rock, our sponsor this week. Jeff, could you tell us a little bit more about that insight regarding microgrid importance and how it could possibly impact manufacturers?
Yeah, I think it just bleeds into resiliency, business continuity, all of those key factors that are so important, keeping the lights on, keeping product going out the door in case there's a natural disaster or just some sort of breakdown at the grid level.
I think the biggest point is feasibility. When people think microgrid, they think it's not something feasible for their company. I think checking out this new video would really help maybe give them a little bit more insight of that.
Especially the ROI element in terms of being able to sell power back to the grid when you don't need it as a running backup source. There's a lot of very interesting insight in the materials.
Well, check it out. We have a link to download that in the comments section if you're with us live, and also in the body copy wherever you find us. Now, let's move on to In Case You Missed It. The stories that maybe weren't as popular on our website, but still stand to make a big impact on the industry going forward. Anna, I'd like to start with you this week. What is your In Case You Missed It?
All right. Well, I thought this would be more interesting to our audience, but maybe they've reached the point of fatigue as it pertains to the Apple car. But Apple announced a pretty significant development, or lack of development, I guess I should say, relating to the Apple car. So since 2014, Apple has been reportedly working towards an electric vehicle, an endeavor that at the time Carl Icahn, the investor, said would serve as the ultimate mobile device. He was talking about this fully autonomous vehicle being able to sort of send people into the Apple ecosystem because they have all this time on their hands to use their Apple Watch and their iPhone and watch Apple TV. I don't know, all that stuff that you could do if you didn't have to drive. So since the project first started gaining attention, there's been a lot of ups and downs. There's been a lot of partnerships that have been developed and then dissolved, rumors of really high costs, even points here and there where people were saying the Apple Car project was dead. According to this recent report, which this was published by Bloomberg, and I should say it was not Apple announcing it, it was Bloomberg announcing it based on some information that they had. But the car is on, they say, but it's been scaled back. Apple is not going to produce an autonomous vehicle as they said they would. They were planning to hit the market with a level 5, which no one has done. Not even any automakers, people who already know how to produce cars. So that was like, you know, I was pretty skeptical of that anyway. Now it sounds like they're kind of admitting that they can't do that. The plan is to come out in 2026. And it will be a much more conventional design. It's going to lower the price tag because of that, which makes sense. So they should be on par to compete with some other high-end electrics. But it's listed as being in a pre-prototype stage at this point. I found this as interesting as I found it confounding, I guess, because I never really got why Apple was pursuing the car business. I get it now, I guess, looking at Carl Icahn's comments about like just trying to push people to use more devices. However, if the car's not going to be autonomous, then why are you making it? You know, Apple has this great business. They're like number one and expert in their core competencies. They have a lock on that market. Why are you getting into the automotive business, which is so hard to achieve like success in, especially as a newcomer? I don't understand what the point of it is. It just seems like a very like it's based on a dare or something. Just go do the things that you already do. Don't make a car. Nobody wants you to make a car.
I think it is the bravado of consumer electronics companies and the industry. We've seen this with a number of startups where they pair with a notable company in the consumer electronics industry to get a little bit of credibility. They think they see the electrification of cars, they see EVs, and they think, oh, now this is our wheelhouse. And have we seen one enter the automotive industry and not fall on its face?
I know.
And what does pre-prototype stage mean? To me, that means there's an empty office with a sketch of a car on it with the Apple logo on it.
Pre-prototype stage is a drawing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that is...
One thing, the one thing that
some really awesome pictures that we printed out on our Apple
super
computer.
Cool. I'm sure they made like a very cool 3D presentation, and it's very flashy, but whatever.
One thing that I have liked about it being a long-promised car is everyone that guesses at it. It's probably part of the curriculum in every industrial design class now, where it's like, show us a rendering of what you think the Apple car will look like. Because every quarter, we see a new variation of what the Apple car will look like. None of it ever comes from Apple.
That's because they keep partnering with companies and then getting ditched, and they have to do it again. It's not working.
Wasn't the most recent one with Foxconn? Where there were talks between Apple and Foxconn? I could be wrong.
I think that's been going on for a while.
Okay.
In terms of a potential contract manufacturer. To me, this feels like they needed to somehow keep this in the news stream or something like that. Like, what can we say? We don't really have anything to show them, so we'll say what we're not going to do.
Right? Yeah. Good or bad news is still news.
I guess.
All right.
Apple bails on full self-driving. Jeff, do you think it's one of those where like a chalkboard moment where somebody walks in, scratches level 5 autonomy, and all the engineers in the room go, okay?
I think it is hubris. You mentioned that. I think it's, look at all these amazing devices we made. We created a market. Basically, that's what Apple did, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the car's already out there. How hard can it be? It's just a car.
Yeah.
Then they started to make one, and it's like, whoa, this is difficult. Yeah, I mean, I don't get it.
Think how many more episodes of Ted Lasso we can stream if they weren't busy driving.
Well, yeah, exactly. Once they fix the user interface on Apple TV, it's horrible trying to figure that out. I mean, come on, make some more movies like Coda instead of trying to build a car.
All right, Jeff, I agree.
Jeff and what we all say, stay in your lane, Apple. Jeff, what is your, in case you missed it this week?
So I really wanted to find something positive.
Oh, great.
All right, Jeff.
We've had some kind of downers on last, so I thought this was a very positive story. Talking about the 15 automakers who have reached their automatic braking goals this year, and actually 6 months ahead of schedule, 8 months ahead of schedule. So 15 automakers have made life-saving automatic emergency braking as a standard featured on nearly all of their passenger vehicles in the U.S. this year. It's a voluntary commitment that they made 6 years ago. The ones that are left, GM, Porsche, Jaguar, Land Rover, Kia, and Maserati, still have until August 31st of next year to hit the goal. And just to clarify, automatic emergency braking can detect objects in the way and stop or slow a vehicle, preventing a crash and making it less severe. IHS has said that the systems have to earn the Institute's advanced rating, slowing a vehicle by at least 10 miles per hour in either the 12 mile per hour or 25 mile per hour test, or 5 miles per hour in both tests. I thought this is an awesome engineering application here. I mean, just from a safety perspective, we ran some stuff this week talking about how driving has gotten less safe in the U.S. We've experienced all of this individually in terms of just encounters on the highway and coming to and from work or any type of driving we do. We see people less attentive, more distracted by devices or anything else. So putting these types of standard features into this isn't something, we've also talked about companies offering subscriptions basically to some of these other services. This is something that's standard. It's taking advantage of all this awesome sensor and camera technology that we have, not for some pie in the sky option like autonomous driving, but to save people right now. So I thought it was a great story, and you can see we're almost there in terms of all the major manufacturers that are on board.
The feature when it came out was one of those that kind of turned your head and made you think, why isn't this on every car?
Kind of like a backup camera.
Yeah, they true. But then I bought a car with a backup camera, and now I can't turn around anymore because I've had no reason.
It's so disorienting to do that after using a backup camera.
Yeah, you jump into somebody else's car with that one, and you're like, what? You know what? I bet I can I'll feel it. I'll know when I'm close. Anna, your thoughts on the pledge that all these automakers not only made, but some being a little bit early in terms of delivering on it.
Yeah, that's great. It can't come a moment too soon. As Jeff said, it is getting more dangerous to drive. It's also getting a lot more dangerous to be a pedestrian. As the data shows that as people transition to really heavy, really high-set vehicles like trucks and SUVs, that pedestrians are just more likely to die if they get hit by a car. This is the kind of stuff that can help with that. We also, I don't know if we ran the story, if I saw it elsewhere, so I apologize for that. I feel like that's a big faux pas on our own podcast. But about how they had determined that 50% of people involved in vehicle accidents with injuries had drugs or alcohol in their system. 50%. And they didn't just look at the drivers, they looked at the passengers as well. And I think that the thought there was not only is there a lot of driving that's happening under the influence, but there's just a lot of people that are using substances out there. Yeah. And it's just, here it is. Yeah. It was us. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's cool. Cool. I mean, it's okay if we reference it somewhere else.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I found that to be surprising as well.
Yeah, it was scary.
Well, and the likelihood that how all of us are tied to screens so frequently that we'll all be night blind within 5 to 10 years.
I think part of this one too, when we talk about all the, the substances that are found in people who are in accidents. Again, vehicles have become much easier to drive and handle, and that just offers a false sense of security and understanding what they're doing. And I can handle it. The vehicle will take care of most of this itself. It's still a 2-ton object going at a high speed at people or objects.
And not as a pedestrian, but it has definitely changed how and when I ride my bicycle. Because I'm a lot more, I used to ride it all the time on any road. I also had a Superman complex that was shattered multiple times. But
along with your bones.
Yeah, along with my brittle bones. But after riding at night and seeing how inattentive people are, it's not worth the risk anymore. All right, my final thought this week was about the rail strike, and how it would have been worse than all previous supply chain disruptions combined. This was an exclusive piece written by Nolan Beilstein that I thought was really interesting, and he started putting it together as we were leading up to the rail strike. And right as he was putting it together, Biden kind of swooped in and he was like, nope, not going to happen. So interesting from how the piece was produced as well. So when contract talks stalled between railway companies and workers, we saw major concerns over a likely rail strike. A bill passed by Congress and signed by President Joe Biden bound workers and rail companies to a proposed settlement, avoiding a work stoppage. Now, that whole aspect of it has got its own problems. According to Dr. Ethan Karp, President and CEO of Manufacturing Advocacy and Growth Network, or Magnet, said it wouldn't have taken long for the economy to feel the effects. He says some food, fuel, car, and chemical manufacturers only have a few days worth of raw materials and space for furnished goods. With rail down, pressure would fall on truckers to pick up the slack, but that industry is experiencing its own driver shortage. In the past 2 years, we've seen COVID shutdowns, the Texas freeze of chemical companies, canal blockages, geopolitical uncertainty and disruption, which have all led to inflation and product delays. Karp says that this rail strike, quote, might have been worse than all of these combined. I wanted to bring this up because I don't think people realize, I think some people in the know realize how big of a deal that rail strike could have been, and that it was averted. How it was averted, you know, you have your own opinions, but the fact that it was averted saved a lot of companies, at least in the interim. Karp says that finely tuned manufacturing lines require everything to work perfectly to deliver complex integrated production perfectly every time. Given the fragility of the system, Karp stresses the importance of a local supply chain and having stock on hand. Though, as we've said many times before on this podcast, he admits that such risk mitigation steps come at a premium and might not be worth it for every manufacturer. I wanted to bring up this story, because I thought it was an interesting behind-the-scenes story of how this one was developing as the larger one was playing a role. Also, just putting another focus on more North American production, how it's incredibly important, and if possible, possibly having more things on hand in the event of another stoppage. Jeff, did you have a chance to check out this article, and what were your thoughts on what this Dr. Karp had to say?
Well, I think it's the way the article performed is representative of the way all the stories regarding this potential strike went. Because really the only time we talked about it was in case you missed it.
Yeah.
This was not one of the leading stories in terms of engagement on our sites, and I think that's because people close to it got it. People who were on the periphery really weren't paying attention to it. It's rail. What does that do? Until you do get inside of it and you realize everything that is still hauled by rail, and really the size of the remaining railroad providers and what they can do, what they haven't been doing. So I think it became also polarizing in terms of whose side you fell on, whether it was the unions who were asking for more, the companies that came to the table and offered up some solutions. Again, there was enough of an opinion there, or a divide between the two, that you could form an opinion either way. But yeah, I think it just came down to the fact that we did not appreciate this until you started looking into it a little bit more closely. Thankfully, it was resolved, so it did not come to this. Again, like you alluded to, you can have your own opinion on the resolution and if it was right or not, but from a consumer perspective, we're definitely benefiting from the fact that these folks did not go on strike and there wasn't a stoppage of the railroads.
Anna, did you find it surprising that he said it could have been worse than COVID, Texas, the canal blockage, everything else that's happening overseas in terms of Russia and Ukraine all put together?
I mean, that's hard to imagine, but I could see that being accurate. I mean, you know, Jeff mentioned like how much stuff that is just sort of quietly moved by rail right now. And if you think about how much pressure that would put on every other transit method that we have in the supply chain, that stuff would collapse. I mean, there's just not, and my concern here is I just don't feel like this is exactly buttoned up.
Gotcha.
I feel like
true. They're still rail workers are still protesting and angry with the deal.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, I feel like this is a Band-Aid. This is a Band-Aid, and we're in the bathtub.
That's a new one.
I like
That's
it.
pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, to your point, yeah, workers are still angry. They did not get what they wanted. You know, I think there's a lot of risk of seeing people leave this industry because they're not getting appropriately awarded, I think, the sick time that they need. It's hard for them to take off work for medical appointments. That was the key issue there, and that did not get resolved. And, you know, and I read yesterday, for example, that they're trying to push through that they can have just one person on a train instead of like a two-person cabin in the front because of all the safety technology. They say that it's pretty easy for them to stop the train in the event of an emergency. But like the people they interviewed that actually work on trains were like, I am terrified of this. If they did this, I mean, it would cut some costs, right? But, it, you know, again, it's just another point about how these workers seem to be getting the short end of the stick like over and over and over again. They're going to start leaving. Like maybe this...
Like truck drivers.
Right, yeah, exactly. So maybe this is, you know, slowing that down. I mean, obviously it would have been catastrophic if they were on strike. But again, I don't think that this is something that we should just exhale and forget about. But we will.
Yeah. Well, I mean...
Till we can't.
Yeah.
Till we can't, yeah.
All right. Well, before we get out of here this week, let's move on to our final thoughts. Anna, what's your final thought this week?
Well, this week my daughter, who is 5, had her Nutcracker ballet recital at, and she goes to this very low-key ballet school where they just like put them in, they read a story every week and they wear a costume every week. And then, so their recital is just like this very low-key thing where you get to just go and watch them dance. There's no auditorium or anything like that. And it just made me think about how wonderful it is when kids get to do things that have like very low expectations and pressures involved. Because I think she would have been terrified to get on a stage, but she loved it, you know?
Yeah.
So that's my final thought. It's just more of that. It was nice. It was really nice.
Mark Waterman, who's watching us live, says 2 episodes away from 100 for a centennial celebration. Give ourselves a pat on the back. So, a couple of attaboys coming from, and atta-people coming from Mark. Yeah, thank you, Mark. My final thoughts this week. First of all, Anna, I'm glad that you're feeling better.
Yeah,
it's good to have you back.
Yeah.
Second of all, I need to apologize because while Anna was under the weather, producer Alex was just really battling COVID, and it kind of slipped my mind. And I felt terrible because even though he was like bedridden for days, he still texted right after the last episode and said, not even a mention? and even though he was out sick, he was still manning our chat, like sending us, so we could still get live questions and comments from the live version of this. So I felt like I was interacting with them live as we were doing this and didn't really recognize that he wasn't in the room. So producer Alex, appreciate that you're back and feeling better, and sorry about that.
Welcome back, buddy. And I mean, to be fair, Alex, like I did have a really runny nose, and I sneezed a lot of times.
Man, her shoulders were sore. She sneezed so much.
So many sneezes.
So you're saying Alex is kind of like the rail strike story of our podcast name.
Yeah.
He's
Don't appreciate him until he's gone.
I didn't even appreciate him when he was gone. I think that was the problem. My other final thought was this week, my family adopted a little puppy named Maybe from an animal shelter. And I would just say that if anyone who is looking to get a pet is hesitant because it's going to be difficult, I will reinforce that, yes, it is difficult, but it is definitely worth it. So pull the trigger if you're thinking about it or even on the fence, because it is completely worth it. And there's a lot of animals out there that need homes. Alex has got one, though. Jeff, what are your final thoughts this week?
First of all, I just want to say thank you to anybody who's involved in the design, development, manufacture, or distribution of snowblowers, because the last week that has been a godsend. It's been like heavy, wet snow that's been coming down, and our house is the first one on the block after the snow plow goes through. So the end of the driveway, I mean, without the snowblower, my wife would have had a really sore back.
Yeah.
And you have a steep driveway, so if you don't get that at the bottom, it's not like you can stop. It's like once you start going out of that garage, you are blasting into that.
Yeah, there's been some fun experiences with that in the past, without a doubt. So I'm just thankful for the snowblower.
Yeah, you know what we could improve snow-wise, though? A little bit more of a heads up when it comes to school closures. A little bit more. I definitely, everything, the podcast is a little off kilter today because of school closings and having a snow day. And man, if it wasn't for your email this morning, I was definitely walking Des to that door.
Yeah, I got the phone call at like 5 something from the school, just the automated one, and I was like, oh, that is a quick turn.
Oh, okay.
But we don't get snow days in Wisconsin very much, so it was very surprising to everyone.
I think it was because the previous one, that we had a previous snowfall that you're talking about that was equally heavy. I think that one was worse. And as a result of that one, everyone was just like, hey, we're not taking any chances here.
True.
Cancel it all.
Yeah.
Huge disruption.
Yeah, not a lot of school closures like here in Madison in the city, but like out in the...
That's true. Out in the rural areas, because every kid takes the bus and stuff, and that's tough.
Jeff, what about trivia this week?
All right, podcast from last week. We had a ton of responses. Again, the polling question was, which of the following would you like as a holiday gift? So we had some great responses. First of all, we heard from Patricia. She said she would definitely like one of those recently discontinued vehicles, specifically the Avalon. She switched a long time ago from Honda to Toyota when Honda didn't come up with a luxury sedan. She has loved her Avalon, and it's time to replace her. She doesn't know what she's going to do. Quote, my heart is broken.
Oh, sad.
Oh, man.
Patricia, to try to mend your broken heart, we will send you a Today in Manufacturing t-shirt.
That will help,
Don't think that's the same, but we'll try.
Band-Aid in a bathtub.
Band-Aid.
There's your Band-Aid in a bathtub, Patricia. So is the Band-Aid in a bathtub, is it a bathtub that we've gotten into that has a Band-Aid, or are we wearing a Band-Aid in a bathtub that's about to fall off?
Yeah, it's about to fall off is what I meant.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Just wanted to clarify.
Clint is also looking for one of those recently discontinued vehicles in his stocking under the tree. He said, as a pilot, the B-21 Raider would be nice, but I don't want the fuel bill. Very practical. I think he can handle filling the tanks of any of those discontinued vehicles. Another popular response was the new car radio. Warren said he appreciates the consistency of a good old-fashioned AM radio. And Randy said he would love the B-21 as well, but his garage is too small. Actually, he wants a Rubik's Cube.
Someone said Rubik's Cube?
Rubik's
I'm
Cube. We
surprised.
had a couple of Rubik's Cube, including John, who said he's concerned about losing the car radio in future electrical vehicles because you can't depend on cellular or satellite methods of transmission information. So
We should get IEN Rubik's Cubes. That's got to be something you can brand now.
that's a good call.
Yeah.
I like it.
Jeff, what would you pick out of these?
Boy, I would be very tempted to... I'd be very tempted to go with the Semi.
Yeah.
Tesla Semi. I think that would be the one that I would lean towards because I cannot solve a Rubik's Cube to save my life.
What would you do with a Semi? Just
I
curious.
think there's a lot of practical applications outside of parking it. I mean, that would be the problem. You need to figure a place to store it. But I mean,
A lot of practical applications
anytime
for your...
anybody moved ever,
Yeah.
you know?
I think
and you're volunteering for
Oh no,
that?
I'll just give him the keys.
Okay. I think that
Keep it plugged in.
you obviously just adopt a nomad lifestyle and live the rest of your life on the road.
Think of the tailgates we could have.
That would be fun.
I could just imagine lifting up the door to the Semi and be like, we are in the right place.
We should probably not grill in here.
Yeah. The last comment actually came from Phil. He is also wanting a Rubik's Cube. He thinks the B-21 would be an awesome plane. He just thinks it's sad we need them at all. Getting one for Christmas would be cool, but I don't think it could land at his local airport. But actually the leading response was the B-21 Raider.
Yeah, everyone's thinking about that
wanted.
resale value.
Yeah.
So still thinking about the holiday season, our polling question says, what does U.S. manufacturing need the most for the holidays? Do they need fewer regulations and government oversight? Maybe more tax incentives? Maybe just more workforce resources, okay? More training, expand, grow the workforce. Need new energy assets with a lot of the renewability and renewable options and sustainability plans. Maybe we need less Elon Musk. Maybe that's what we need for Christmas. Or more cowboy candy.
Ooh.
Is it?
Any of those. Or if you want to give us just another answer, it's fine.
Do they need more cowboy candy or more of David Cowboy Canty Manty? They call me Canty
I was
Manty.
wondering where you were going to take that.
Yeah.
I'm just going to let you go with it. So is that your code name?
Yeah, I mean, it is now.
Cowboy
Yeah, I've
Candy
changed
Manty.
all my handles. You can find me on Twitter at Cowboy Candy Manty.
Oof. Be careful who's responding to that.
It has changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could see that being a problem.
I like how you have other under there. If you can't find one of these under America's Christmas tree, you're at a
Hey,
loss.
other suggestions are great.
Yeah.
All right, let us know.
Okay, well, before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. To email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, Anna, or David at in.com with email the podcast in the subject line. Please make sure to subscribe to our daily newsletters to make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. And make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube at IN Magazine. We're hoping to hit that next threshold, which is yet to be determined. I'd say it's got to be 9,000 now, right? Can't just go like 850. Yeah. Remember, one more episode this year, and then we are going to start the new year with episode 100. For Jeff Ranke and Anna Wells, I'm David Mantee. This is the Today in Manufacturing podcast, and we'll see you next week.